Human.
Welcome to Created by Human. I'm Todd. Today I'm flying solo. The guys and I were trying to do an episode earlier, and for some reason it just didn't work. Everything was failing. Systems, software, all of it was making a dang mess. So today I wanted to give you guys something, and what we were going to talk about is Alan Watts. Alan Watts is a phenomenal guy. I want to look up his Wikipedia here real quick so I can kind of give you just his actual stats. So Alan Watts was born on January 6, 1915. It's a long time ago. Died November 16th, 1973. He was 58 years old. He was born in Kent, England, and died in Marin County, California. He was an English writer, speaker, and self-styled philosophical entertainer, known for interpreting and popularizing Buddhism, Taoism, and Hindu philosophy for a Western audience. Now, this dude can talk. He's kind of got that old school dialect that just fascinating to sit there and listen to him. He's got a little bit of an English accent. He's just a really cool guy to listen to, but his take on things such as spiritualism and Jesus and the Bible and just humanity is very fascinating. And I kind of feel like Alan Watts, although if you kind of live in the circle of the oddity and the strange, you've probably heard of Alan Watts, but if you don't, this might be a new guy for you to check out. So what I wanted to do today was just play a couple videos from Alan Watts. They're about 12 minutes each, and I'm just going to kind of stop it and interject when he's saying certain things just to talk about what he's saying, because I do find him so fascinating to listen to. So I'm just going to let it play through and just let you kind of listen and take it all in, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about it. So in the end, leave me some comments. Tell me what you think about Alan Watts and his take and how it maybe relates to your vision of, spiritualism or your religious beliefs or just your take on humanity. I would love to hear what you guys have to say. So we're going to start out with this one video. It's called "It's Time to Wake Up," Alan Watts on religion. So I'm going to give it a play, and you let me know if you like it.
A lot of people don't know how we got the Bible at all. We Westerners got the Bible thanks to the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church and members of the Church wrote the books of the New Testament. And they took over the books of the Old Testament, which even by the time of Christ had not been finally decided upon by the Jews. The Jews did not close the canon of the Old Testament until the year 100 AD or thereabouts at the Synod of Jamnia. And then they finally decided which were the canonical books of the Hebrew Scriptures and embodied them in the Masoretic text, the earliest copy of which dates from the 10th century, early in the 10th century AD. The books to be included in the New Testament were not finally decided upon until the year 382 AD again, at the Synod of Rome under Pope Damasus. So it was the Church, the Catholic Church, that promulgated the Bible and said, we are giving you these scriptures on our authority and by the authority of the informal tradition that has existed among us from the beginning, inspired by the Holy Spirit. So you receive historically the Bible on the Church's say-so. And the Catholic Church insists, therefore, that the Church, collectively, speaking under the presumed guidance of the Holy Spirit, has the authority to interpret the Bible. And you can take that or leave it.
So these higher leaders were the ones who made the decisions of, in the end, what would be put in these canons, the Old Testament and the New Testament. So when you think about that they had to say that anything that didn't fall in line with their particular beliefs was cut out. Didn't fall in line with what they wanted you to believe was cut out. So Alan is just pointing this out. Yeah, in a great way. I mean, that's something to think about too. I mean, there are other writings of the Bible that just never made it in. Other scripts. I mean, in certain areas like the Ethiopian Bible, there is so much more text in there, so many more pages that aren't included in our King James version. So again, it's just something to listen to and just something to think about, that why wasn't that included? And maybe for yourself, you can go check out these other texts. Let's get back to what Alan's saying here.
Because obviously, the authority of the Bible is not, first of all, based on the Bible itself. I can write a Bible and state within that book that it is indeed the Word of God which I have received, and you're at liberty to believe me or not. Hindus believe that the Vedas are divinely revealed and inspired with just as much fervor as any Christian or any Jew. Muslims believe that the Quran is divinely inspired, and some Buddhists believe that their sutras are also of divine, or rather a Buddhic origin. The Japanese believe that the ancient texts of Shinto are likewise of divine origin. And who is to be judge? If we're going to argue about this, as to which version of the truth is the correct one, we will always end up in an argument in which the judge and the advocate are the same person. And you wouldn't want that if you were brought into a court of law, would you? Because if I say that, well, thinking it all over, I find that Jesus Christ is the greatest being who ever came onto this earth, by what standards do I judge? Why, obviously, I judge by the sort of moral standards that have been given to me as somebody brought up in a Christian culture. There is nobody impartial who can decide between all the religions, because more or less everybody has been, in one way or another, influenced by one of them. So if the church says the Bible is true, it finally comes down to you. Are you going to believe the church or aren't you? If nobody believes the church, it will be perfectly plain, won't it, that the church has no authority? Because the people is always the source of authority. That's why de Tocqueville said that the people gets what government it deserves.
Such a fascinating take on this, talking about that, if you don't believe, then the church has no authority anymore, that there's no power that they have anymore. So back in the day, you were a churchgoer. Most people didn't read or write. These highly scholared Pharisees from back in the day, and then priests, they told you what the Bible said, and they told you their interpretation of the Bible. Now, we've come a long way since then, and I think that's why you've seen in Europe how they've, for the most part, not everyone, but for the most part, have abandoned faith, have abandoned the church, because now there's so much more information. Like if you were a Christian back in the day, a Catholic back in the day, maybe not educated, and you go to church and you're hearing these things and they're telling you how to interpret it, you don't know anything else. You don't know that there's, in Hindu culture, there's the Vedas. You don't know that in the Muslim culture, there's the Quran. You don't know these things. Really, you don't, but you've never studied them. Maybe you've heard of them, but you've never studied them. So now you're being told what to believe. And in being told what to believe, you have no other choice but to either believe it wholeheartedly or to throw it all out with the bathwater, right? So this is where we are. We're at a point in time to where you can read your own things. You have again, Alexandria's library in your pocket at all moments, at all times. So at any time you can pull it out and you can look up anything. You can look up other religious texts, right, that have been translated, that you can sit there and go, well, man, that sounds similar, or that sounds different. We have so much knowledge at our fingertips. And that also goes to question with the Library of Alexandria, that it was said it contained all written knowledge from so far in the past before we can even fathom, right? Before maybe even the Sumerian text, there was so much knowledge, and that was destroyed for a purpose, right? Because you can't have people thinking freely. You can't have people thinking different. You can't have that. You have to have people who believe what you're telling them. And if there's any alternatives, then that poses a problem with your control. Now you no longer have control over the people. Huge problem, right? So again, we're at a point in time to where you can study all these things yourselves. And I think what you'll find, because it's what I found, is that you'll begin to find that there are so many similarities in all these different cultures and all these different belief systems. There's so many similarities that you have to say maybe there's truth to some of them. Now, are they far-fetched? Are they elaborate? Yes, for sure. But there's truth to them because they're found all over the world at a time where there wasn't supposed to be any communication between these distant lands. Take that as you will. I think it says a lot. So do your own studying. Go out there and check it out. And that's basically what Alan Watts is saying here, you know. Don't just believe what you're being fed. Look around, listen, pay attention, and form your own conclusion.
You may say, well, God himself is the authority. How are we to show that? That's your opinion. But you say, well, you wait and see. The day of judgment is coming, and then you'll find out who's the authority. Yes, but at the moment, there is no evidence for the day of judgment. And it remains, until there is evidence, simply your opinion that the day of judgment is coming. And there is nothing else to go on, except the opinion of other people who hold the same view and whose opinions you bought. So really, I won't deny anybody's right to hold these opinions. You may indeed believe that the Bible is literally true and that it was actually dictated by God to Moses and the prophets and the apostles. That may be your opinion, and you are at liberty to hold it. I don't agree with you. I do believe, on the other hand, that there is a sense in which the Bible is divinely inspired. But I mean by inspiration something utterly different from dictation. Receiving a dictated message from an omniscient authority. I think inspiration comes very seldom in words. In fact, almost all the words written down by automatic writing from a psychic input that I've ever read strike me as a bit thin. When a psychic begins to try and write of deep mysteries instead of telling you what your sickness is or who your grandmother was, he begins to get superficial. And psychically communicated philosophy is never as interesting as philosophy carefully thought out. But divine inspiration isn't that kind of communication. Divine inspiration is, for example, to feel, for reasons that you can't really understand, that you love people. Divine inspiration is a wisdom which it's very difficult to put into words, like mystical experience. That's divine inspiration. And a person who writes out of that experience could be said to be divinely inspired. Or it might come through dreams, through archetypal messages from the collective unconscious, through which the Holy Spirit could be said to work. But since inspiration always comes through a human vehicle, it is liable to be distorted.
It's liable to be distorted. That's where I lean, you know? That's where I lean. I lean in the direction that the words we are reading hold some truth, because they were audible stories carried down for, we don't really know how long, but they were stories carried down over and over again. And, you know, like any other story, it starts to change over time. Little things get added, they get changed, they get embellished. So it's an audible thing, man. And so when you think about it, what is it telling us? What is it telling us? It's telling us that these are not exactly as they seem, that the words in this Bible are not meant to be taken literally, and that scares me. That scares me because we have many a group out there, especially here in the States, that it is very literal. It is very literal. That's terrifying because a lot of it doesn't even make common sense. Like it doesn't fall under common sense. So common sense would tell you that makes there's no logic to that. How could that even be possible? Even if you believed in like miracles and all these other things, how could that logically be possible? So instead of using our natural brains, and this is the thing that frustrates me so much, that God is out there. God has given us these brains to be intellectual, right? We're not apes. We're not other animals. We are extremely intelligent beings on this planet. So that was gifted to us. Let's say that's gifted to us. So we're meant to use it. So when we question things, when we question that doesn't seem right, I would say 98% of the time when we have a gut feeling and we say that this doesn't feel right, our feelings are justified. We were right about whatever that was. You hear a mother's instinct, all that stuff is super true. So something's telling us that we need to investigate this, that this can't be 100% accurate. Like, history has now shown us that these things tie together, that these spots were true, that we found these locations, and history is starting to point to that and say, hey, there are some actual facts within these stories, but they are embellished stories, and we have to understand that. Some are just parables. Really, they're stories to make you think, and not to be taken literal, and that is terrifying. It's terrifying to think that there are people out there, and a lot of people out there, that take these things literal. It does scare me. And that, I think, is over time where we kind of have that divide in, the good and the bad of religion and Christianity, right? The bad is the fact that they take these things so literal that they'll burn people at the stake for them. The good is that in Christianity, a lot of people have had a place to turn for help. Really. The bad, that, people within those powers, within the power in the church, have taken advantage of people for multiple things, financially, sexually. But the good, again, is that people have found inspiration. People have turned their lives around. I think we all know somebody that all of a sudden found Jesus and their life was a wreck. They maybe were addicted to porn, drugs, alcohol, you name it. And with this newfound vision of life through their new faith, they've turned their lives around and they become better people, and they become better husbands and better wives and parents and friends. So there's the good and the bad. And we just have to honestly find our own way. And I just don't think you can be a zealot. You got to be careful with that, with anything. You just can't be a zealot, If you smoked all your life and then you quit smoking, don't start, bashing on people who are smoking, don't start putting them down. Remember that you were there. Right? Pump them up. Tell them they can do it if they want to quit. And if they don't want to quit, then that's their choice. Let them do that. I hate when I see people go to the extreme, and we have to stop doing that. All right, let's get back to what Alan's saying here.
In other words, I'm talking to you through a sound system. And it's the only one now available. Now, if there's something wrong with this sound system, whatever truths I might utter to you will be distorted. My voice will be distorted. And you might mistake the meaning of what I said. Now, so therefore, everybody who receives divine inspiration, and I'm using that in a very loose way, you can mean anything you like by divine, that's your option. But anybody who receives it will express it within the limits of what language he knows. And by language here, I don't only mean English, Latin, Greek, Hebrew, or Sanskrit. I mean language in the sense of what sort of terms are available to you. What kind of religion were you brought up with? Now, you see, if you were brought up in the Bible Belt, you came out of Arkansas somewhere, and that's all the religion you knew, and you had a mystical experience of the type where you suddenly discover that you are one with God, then you're liable to get up and say, I'm Jesus Christ. And lots of people do. Well, the culture that we live in just can't allow that. There are only one Jesus Christ. And sort of you don't look like you were Jesus Christ coming back again, because it's said in the scriptures that when he comes back, there'll be no doubt about it. He'll appear in the heavens with legions of angels, and you're not doing that. You're just old Joe Dokes that we knew years ago, and now you say you're Jesus Christ. Well, he says that when Jesus Christ said he was God, nobody believed him, and you don't believe again. You know, you can't answer that argument. But you see, he says it that way because he is trying to express what happened to him in terms of a religious language which is circumscribed by the Holy Bible. He's never read the Upanishads. He's never read the Diamond Sutra. He's never read the Tibetan Book of the Dead or the I Ching or the Lao Tzu. And therefore, there is no other way in which he can say this.
This goes back to what I was saying. You've never explored any other options. You've never looked outside of your circle. You know, it's equivalent to, I live here in Georgia. I live in this just north of Atlanta. I've never been anywhere else, right? Like, let's say I've never even been to Atlanta, the big city. That's a different world to me, right? I can't even understand that. So I stay within my bubble and I stay close to the people that are more like me, that, you know, live within my community, think more like me, look more like me, right? That's scary. That's terrifying, right? So if you haven't, again, explored the world around you or looked at these other texts, you've got to. There's no way you can make a sound opinion on anything until you've explored all the other options, right? Like, you can't sit there and even say, you know, I'm 100% diehard. This is what I am. Okay. Have you looked at any of the other options? I mean, just even read them to do comparisons, just to even understand those other worlds, right? Like, you know, again, the Vegas from the Hindus and the Islamic text, you know, any of these things. Have you ever looked at these things, read them, studied them, not because you want to change your belief system, but because you want to understand it? How does it work against your belief system? Or are you going to find that a lot of it is entangled, that there are slight differences, right? But you don't know. I mean, it's the same thing with like these extreme Islam characters that are going on, and they're so into what they believe that there's no other way. I mean, we are truly the enemy, right? Like, if you're Westerner, you're just the enemy, and that's how it is. And then they raise their kids that exact same way. All of that's got to change. We have to expand our minds. We have to look outside of it. We have to start looking at other things that we just don't agree with, so that we can at least understand them, so that we can at least start to have conversations with people about these things, you know, instead of just immediately shutting people off. And even with that, you know, most of the people who are Christ followers that believe in Jesus Christ, and that's who they follow. And they're so diehard not to get their hands dirty. They don't, oh my gosh, I can't be in that place, and I can't do this, and I can't listen to that music. And if that's not a Christian movie, I can't watch it. That's insane to me. And the reason that's insane to me too is because the guy you follow was doing all those things. He was hanging out with whores. He was hanging out with drunkards and druggies. Tax collectors. He was hanging out with the worst of the worst, because that's where he needed to be. Why did he need to be there? I mean, let's take the spirituality. Let's take the Son of God thing out of it entirely. Let's just say he's a prophet. Let's just say that he's a prophet spreading the word of peace and love, and that's what he's doing. Okay, well, if that's all he's doing, he's in the right space, right? He's going out with people who, let's say a whore, for an example, a prostitute, not a whore, a prostitute. She's out there living her life to do the best she can. Probably her upbringing was tough, right? She doesn't know any other way to make any money, right? Except for selling her body. So within that, she has really kind of beat herself up inside. When she lays her head down at night all by herself, right? She's probably tormented by what she has to do and what she's been through. So then this guy, Jesus, shows up and just loves her for nothing. She said, "What do you want from me?" "I don't want anything from you." "Okay. That's it. I don't want anything from you. I just want to be your friend. I just want to show you that I love you for no other reason. I don't need anything from you." And that's foreign to people. We even do that today. That's what we do today. I need something from you, right? Am I Christian enough? Right? Like, am I Christian enough? Do I go to church every week? Do I make sure that I don't watch any R-rated movies? Do I make sure that my music is clean? Like, are you Christian enough? And I think in the end, what it's all supposed to be is just truly enjoying who you are, where you are, and loving people. And just, it's not like you have to like everybody, but just show some common courtesy for people. Who cares? Who cares if they're different than you? There's something to embrace there, and there's something to either learn or to teach. And we've just got to start doing that. And I don't even know if that's what Alan Watts is talking about here. He's talking about some different stuff. But his point, my point is, how do you know unless you've explored all the options?
But if he had read the Upanishads, he would have had no difficulty, and nor would the culture, the society in which he was talking, have any difficulty. Because it says in the Upanishads, we are all incarnations of God. Now, my assumption, my opinion, is that Jesus of Nazareth was a human being, like Buddha, like Sri Ramakrishna, like Ramana Maharshi, etc., who early in life had a colossal experience of what we call cosmic consciousness. Now, you don't have to be any particular kind of religion to get this experience. It can hit anyone, anytime. There are obviously a number of you in this building who've had it, in greater or lesser degree, but it's found all over the world. And when it hits you, you know it. Sometimes it comes after long practice of meditations and spiritual discipline. Sometimes it comes for no reason that anybody can determine. We say it's the grace of God. But there comes this overwhelming conviction that you have mistaken your identity, that what I thought was just old Alan Watts, who I know very well is just a big act and a show. But what I thought was in, me, was only completely superficial. That I am an expression of an eternal something or other. X. A name that can't be named, as the name of God was taboo among the Hebrews. I am. And that I suddenly understand why, exactly why everything is the way it is. It's perfectly clear. Furthermore, I feel no longer any boundary between what I do and what happens to me. I feel that everything that's going on is my doing, just as my breathing is. Is your breathing voluntary or involuntary? Do you do it or does it happen to you? So you can feel it both ways. But you feel everything like breathing. And it isn't as if you had become a puppet. There is no longer any separate you. There is just this great happening going on. And if you have the name in your background, you will say, this happening is God, or the will of God, or the doing of God. Or if you don't have that word in your background, you will say with the Chinese, it is the flowing of the Tao. Or if you're a Hindu, you will say it is the Maya of Brahman. The Maya means the magical power, the creative illusion, the play. So you can very well understand how people to whom this happens feel genuinely inspired, because very often there goes along with it an extremely warm feeling, because you see the divine in everybody else's eyes. When Kabir, a great Hindu-Muslim mystic, was a very old man. He used to look around at people and say, "To whom shall I preach?" Because he saw the beloved in all eyes. But there is everybody, in his own peculiar way, playing out an essential part in this colossal cosmic drama.
So the idea here is that, in a sense, we are all one. That inherently we are these pure souls that basically all go back to our source. We all go back to the place where we came from. Call it heaven. Some people call it multiverses or different dimensions. I think what we're going to find out is they're all one and the same. But we all go back there. But here, we choose different paths. Here, we decide whether we're going to be these players in this game that either play the game cautiously or we play the game a little bit, I guess in a way, throwing out the rules. A little defiant. Just to see how much we can get away with. And sometimes that bites us. Sometimes we make big mistakes. But we learn from those mistakes. Hopefully. I think most of us do. I think there's actually a very few amount that don't. So we learn from our mistakes. And then we go back to the source, back home, back to heaven. And our souls take these experiences. I, for one, believe in reincarnation. I believe that we have the choice to do this over and over again. We look at the Hindus. The Hindus believe, and this isn't right or wrong, I honestly have no idea. I choose to believe one thing. But the Hindus believe that we keep coming back, reincarnation, keep coming back each time until we've learned exactly what we needed to learn, right? So at some point, you've learned exactly what you needed to learn, and there's no point to come back, and now you ascend further into heaven. I believe that, we're given this choice. I think we can go back as many times as we want, I think there is a part of lessons. They say that when you die, you have a life review. And in this life review, you are basically shown this current life. You're shown how your actions have affected other people in conversations or just just the way you treat people. But not only that, you feel not how you feel, you do, but you also feel that person that you interacted with. You also feel down the line their people that they interacted with, right? So if you go to the grocery store and there's a person helping you that works there and you treat them like crap and you've made them have a really bad day, they go home, they talk to their kid, they treat their kid awful as well, just because that's how their day has gone. So you're part of this cycle, right? So I believe that in this life review that you're going to feel every one of those. You're going to feel how you felt in that moment. You're going to feel how that employee felt in that moment. You're going to feel how their child felt in that moment. And it's just going to go on and on from there and trickle down, right? So let's say that child goes off being something else and doesn't have a good life. You're going to be one of those moments that help that path go sideways. What do you do with that, right? So what do you do with that? Try to treat people well. So, again, back to that. I believe you can come back and do it over and over again. I believe that you're going to look at not only your current life and everything in your life review, you're going to review all your lives, everything you've done. And I think each time we do this, our souls come back and they get a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, right? And it's also for the experience. I think where we come from, nothing is tangible. Like all this isn't to feel sorrow, to feel like we don't know what that means. So we have to come down here to feel those things, to feel sorrow, to feel joy, to feel pain, to feel loss, to feel all these things, because where we come from, we can't feel those things. Everything just is, right? Like all knowledge just is, but we don't know feeling, right? Like I think we don't know what it means to be hurt, angry, and just these huge swings. And, we've all had those moments where you're happy, you're joyful, and then the next thing, you're just sad. Because in that happy, in that joy, something struck a chord that reminded you of something that maybe you no longer have. A loved one, a parent. So then you immediately get sad. Those are such extreme expressions that I don't believe exist on the other side. So we have to come here and get those experiences. Anyways, I tend to ramble on when it's just me. I apologize. Here's another video that I want to play for us. It's called This Will Give You Goosebumps. And it is also by Alan Watts on death. And hope you enjoy it.
Isn't it incredible that out of the nothing that is your past, here you are? As far back as I can remember, into earliest childhood, I've always been absolutely fascinated with the idea of death. Now, most reasonable people just dismiss the thought. They say, you can't imagine that. They shrug their shoulders and say, well, that'll be that. But I suppose I'm one of those ornery people who aren't content with an answer like that. Not that I'm trying to find something else beyond that, but that I'm just absolutely fascinated with what it would be like to go to sleep and never wake up. I mean, lots of people think it will be like going into the dark forever or being buried alive. But obviously, it wouldn't be like that at all. Because we know darkness by contrast, and only by contrast, with light. I have a friend, a girl, who's very intelligent and articulate, and she was born blind. And she hasn't the faintest idea what darkness is. The word means as little to her as the word light. So if you went to sleep, you're not aware of darkness when you're asleep. And so if you went into sleep, into unconsciousness for always and always and always, it wouldn't be at all like going into the dark. It wouldn't be at all like being buried alive. It would be as if, as a matter of fact, you had never existed at all.
So what Alan's saying here, pretty cut and dry, that if, I guess the fear is, you better believe in something or there's going to be nothing. It's just going to be darkness. Doesn't that scare you? And what Alan's saying here is, no, that shouldn't scare you, because if there's nothing, then there's nothing, right? So we know what dark is. We know what fear is, right? A lot of us are scared of the dark. But what Alan's saying here is, like, in this next phase, when you die, if there is nothing, then you're not going to be, there's nothing to be scared of. There's no dark. There's no anything. So I don't think he's saying that for certain there's not a heaven. I think what he's saying is, if your fear is that there's nothing, you shouldn't have a fear of nothing, because you won't know. Like you won't be in darkness for forever. You won't have that. If consciousness doesn't exist, you won't be there, right? So I get it. I mean, it makes perfect sense that there's nothing to fear if you don't believe in an afterlife. There's nothing. No darkness, because you don't know what darkness is. Like the blind woman, she has no idea what darkness is. She has no idea what light is. She's never experienced that. So in the same phase, that if life and consciousness just stops at death, nothing to worry about.
Not only you, but everything else as well. You would be in that state as if you had never been. And there, of course, there would be no problems. There would be no one to regret the loss of anything. You couldn't even call it a tragedy because there would be no one to experience it as a tragedy. It would be simple, nothing at all. Forever and for never. Because not only would you have no future, you would also have no past and no present. Now, you would think that that was a point where we'd say, well, let's talk about something else. But I'm not content with that. I demur. Because this makes me think of two other things. This state of nothingness makes me think, first of all, the only thing I get anywhere in my experience that's close to nothingness is the way my head looks to my eyes. Because I seem to feel that there is a world out there, as it were, confronting my eyes. And then behind my eyes, there isn't a black spot. There isn't even a hazy spot. There's nothing at all.
I love this. I just do. I mean, think about that. And until I heard this, I couldn't wrap my head around this for a second, just because I've never thought about it. That in our view, right, as you expand out, move your hands out, then eventually your hands disappear. But you're not scared. You don't feel like there's not nothing behind me, but I can't see it, right? But I'm not scared that it doesn't exist. So it's the same thing that he's saying, like even behind our eyes, right? That we take in all these things, but is there nothing inside here? Is there nothing behind this visual perception of what's going on just in my view? No, I know and also assume that there's more going on. Pretty cool.
I'm not aware of my head, as it were, as a black hole in the middle of all this luminous visual experience. It doesn't even have very clear edges because the field of vision is an oval, and if I run my fingers along my field of vision, it's like this, and this is the point where my fingers just disappear from sight, vague-edged. But then behind this oval of vision, there is nothing at all, just from the sense of sight. Of course, if I use my fingers and touch, I can feel something behind my eyes. But if I use the sense of sight alone, there's just nothing there at all. Nevertheless, out of that blankness, I see. Well, that's the first thing it makes me think of. Now, the next thing it makes me think of is this. If, when I'm dead, I am as if I never had been, then that's the way I was before I was born. Because just as, if I try to go back behind my eyes and find what is there, I come to a blank, if I try to remember back and back and back and back, I've got my earliest memories, and then behind them, nothing. Total blank. But just as I know there's something behind my eyes by using my fingers on my head, so I know through other sources of information that before I was born there was something going on. There were my father and my mother and their fathers and mothers, and the whole material environment of the earth and its life out of which they came, and behind that the solar system, and behind that the galaxy, and behind that all the galaxies, and behind that, another blank space.
So if we believe that there was life before us, then we believe that there's life after us, then how can we not believe that there could be more to this universe, more to this consciousness, more to, I guess, just even spirituality? How can we believe that there's not? Because again, like he just stated, we believe that there was a world before us. We never saw it. I don't have proof of it other than some images, right? But I never saw them. I never put my hands on them. I've had stories of my parents telling me things they did before I was around. I don't know, right? I didn't see it. So if seeing is believing, yet we still believe even though we never saw these things, then that leaves a lot of room open to believe in otherworldly things that we've never seen.
So I reason that if I go back when I'm dead to the state where I was before I was born, couldn't I happen again? You know, what has happened once can very well happen again. If it happened once, it's extraordinary. And it's not really very much more extraordinary if it happened all over again. So in other words, I do know for certain, because I've seen people die, and I've seen people born after them, that at any rate, after I die, not only somebody, but myriads of other beings will be born. That I know. We all know that. There's no doubt about it. But what worries us is that when we're dead, there could be nothing at all forever, as if that was something to worry about. Before you were born, there was this same nothing at all forever, and yet you happened. And if you happened once, you can happen again. Now, what does that mean? Well, we'll get at it first in its very simplest way. And to explain myself, I must invent a new verb. This is the verb to I. And in the first place, we'll spell that with the letter I. But instead of having it as a pronoun, we'll call it a verb. The universe eyes. It has eyed in me, and it eyes in you. Now let's respell the word E-Y-E. When I talk about to eye something, it means to look at something, to be aware of something. So we'll change the spelling and we'll say the universe eyes. It becomes aware of itself in each one of us. And it keeps on eyeing. And every time it eyes, every one of us in whom it eyes feels that he is the center of the whole thing. And that I know that you feel that you are I in just the same way that I feel that I am I. And we all have the same background of nothing. We don't remember having done it before. And yet it has been done before, again and again and again, not only before in time, but all around us everywhere else in space is everybody is the universe eyeing. Now look, let me try and make this clearer in this way. When I say it's the universe eyeing, who is eyeing? What do you mean by I? Well, there are two things you can mean by it. On the one hand, you can mean what's called your ego, your personality. But that's not your real eyeing, because your personality is your idea of yourself. It's your image of yourself. And that's made up of how you feel yourself, how you think about yourself, thrown in with what all your friends and relations have told you about yourself. So your image of yourself, however, obviously isn't you any more than your photograph is you, or any more than the image of anything is it. All our images of ourselves are nothing more than caricatures. They contain no information, for most of us, on how we grow our brains, how we work our nerves, how we circulate our blood, how we secrete with our glands, and how we shape our bones. That isn't contained in the sensation or the image we call the ego.
That as well is mind-boggling. Like, we are not aware at all, of what's happening with our bodies. And we can feel pain, right? Like, oh gosh, something hurts in my side, my back's sore, da 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 da. But there are functions happening within our body that we can't tell on a daily basis. They just happen, right? So as far as consciousness goes, we're not aware at all that these things are happening, right? So again, that is there a physical, an actual separation between consciousness and body, right? We've talked about this before, that the mind, the body, and consciousness are separate from each other, right? Consciousness and the body are separate from each other. That the mind is just this fine-tuned biological radio or antenna that picks up our signal, our consciousness signal. So for me, my consciousness is outside of me, but it's tuned to this body, just to this body, as far as I know. I mean, could be multi-universal type things that are happening, but it's tuned to this body. And at any point when this physical body dies, there's that separation, that they call it the silver cord is now severed, and you're no longer attached to this body. But it just poses a question, are we these bodies, or are we something entirely different that just inhabits this body for the experience, right? At inception. And again, don't want to get in political things. You start talking about, when is life, as far as birth goes. I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't know for certain, but I want to say that it's at the moment that seed and that egg come together. And there is that spark. There's a literal spark. I believe that is consciousness entering at that moment. Maybe that's life. I don't know, but maybe it is. So again, talking here about the ego. The ego is self-awareness here, right? From what other people are saying, from what I think about myself. But outside of that is consciousness that lives on.
So obviously then, the ego image is not myself. So myself contains all these factors that we could say the body is doing: the circulation of the blood, the breathing, the electrical activity of the nerves. All this is me, but I don't know anything about it. I don't know how it came together. I don't know how it's constructed. And yet, I do all that. If it is true also to say, I breathe, I walk, I think, I am conscious. I don't know how I manage to be, but I do it in the same way as I grow my hair. So, I must therefore locate the center of me, my eyeing, at a deeper level than my ego, which is my image or idea of myself. But how deep do we go? We can say the body is the eye. But the body comes out of the rest of the universe, comes out of all its energy. So it's the universe that's eyeing. And the universe eyes in the same way that a tree apples or that a star shines. And the center of the appling is the tree, the center of the shining is the star, and so the basic center or self, of the eyeing, which is called in this case Alan Watts, which is only a name for this particular physical organism, flowering from, shining out of this particular environment, makes the center of all this eyeing the eternal universe, or eternal. The thing has existed for 10,000 million years, and will probably go on for at least that much more. So we won't worry about how long it goes on. But repeatedly it eyes. So that it seems to me absolutely reasonable to assume that when I die, and this physical body evaporates and the whole memory system with it, then it will be all over once again. The awareness that I had before, not exactly the same way, but of a baby being born. There will, of course, be myriads of babies born, not only baby human beings, but baby frogs, baby rabbits, baby fruit flies, baby viruses, baby bacteria. And which one of them am I going to be?
I hope I'm not bacteria. Maybe a baby rabbit would be fun. I don't know. Yeah, so is consciousness, is this physical form, is this universe as a whole really being aware of itself? I guess meaning, if the universe exists and it can't witness itself, right? It can't witness its glory. Do we exist in a physical form so that we can witness it for the universe? Maybe. Maybe. Is consciousness just a part of the universe? Maybe. Don't really have a clue. But I do find it fascinating to think that we are these, again, the most intellectual species on this planet that we know of, that's witnessing the world around us and creating and witnessing just the creation of everything. Are we a part of the universe being able to witness itself, being able to experience itself? Is the word universe, can it be swapped with God? Are we a piece of God that's able to experience the physical world? Well, yeah, I think so. Well, again, I love listening to Alan Watts. His mind, to me, is just simply brilliant. And if you get a chance, check out more of his stuff. And so, today was just me. So I figured I'd kind of share with you somebody that I like to listen to, and have you listen to him with me and share my thoughts. So that's it. Have a great day. Love you guys.
Created by human